Hello everybody, welcome back to C&S Corvettes in Sarasota, Florida. It's your Corvette buddy Lyle here to talk to you about more interesting, exciting, and hopefully informative Corvette information. If you're not familiar with our channel, we talk about all things Corvette, how to fix them, how to buy them, how to sell them, how to take care of them, and how to enjoy them. So without getting into too much other stuff, like, subscribe, all that, I'm not going to go through that today. You've heard it a million times. You know what to do if you find value in what we do. Today we're going to talk about one of the most interesting conundrums in the automotive world when it comes to buying and selling cars, and it's what we call the Corvette gap. We'll get into that in just a second. Now, what I'm talking about when I say the Corvette gap, I'm talking about a unique situation that occurs between Corvette sellers of used cars and Corvette buyers of used cars. And I'm not talking about dealers, I'm talking about private individuals. And it is all about buyer math versus seller math. And this is unique in the automotive world. This gap exists in any market, but it seems to be really wide between what sellers expect for their cars and what buyers are willing to pay in the Corvette world specifically. So it's all about buyer math versus seller math. Let's talk about seller math. Okay, Jim has a car. He's got a Corvette. He paid $25,000 for it 10 years ago. In that time, he's done about $6,000 worth of maintenance. He did a few little upgrades, performance, a little add-on stuff for, let's call it $2,500 there. And he drove the car about 20,000 miles since he bought it a decade ago. So it's a weekend car, take it to a couple of car shows. And so he's ready to move on and either upgrade, or he wants to get something that's got more cargo capacity, whatever it is, he's ready to let the car go. But he knows what he has. So he's not going to, he's not going to let anybody take advantage of him. So, I mean, after all, it's a Corvette. You shouldn't lose money on a Corvette, right? Okay, so here's how his math works. He bought the car for $25,000, did $6,000 worth of maintenance, upgraded, put a bunch of stuff on the car that he liked, cold air intake, whatever, $2,500 there, and God forbid it's a show car, because then you're going to have to pay, as the seller, you're going to be asked to pay the trophy tax. This car is a trophy winner, so that's going to add to it. Let's assume for the ease of math that this one did not win a bunch of trophies at car shows. So, and of course, the mindset of he's not going to lose money because it's a Corvette. So in his mind, you add all those numbers up, it comes to, $33,500, right? So he's going to look at that, and he figures $33,500 is a reasonable asking price. He'd be willing to consider maybe $32,000, maybe. That's from the seller's end of things. Now, let's rewind that, and we're going to talk about buyer math. People buying used Corvettes, especially people who are buying Corvettes to actually drive. They're not buying them as investments. They're not buying them to restore them. They're not buying them they're going to drive this car. It is going to be a used vehicle, sometimes daily driven, like around in our area here. So let's say that the buyer is starting off with a budget of $25,000. That's what he realistically can spend on the car. Unfortunately, in the Corvette world, that usually means that the cars that he really wants are $35,000 to $40,000. But let's assume that this particular buyer, we'll call him Buyer Bob. Buyer Bob is reasonable, and he realizes that he doesn't want to go over his budget because the budget's the budget for a reason. So he sees Jim's asking price of $33,500. And in his mind, buyer math works this way. $33,500 from Jim instantly means you're going to take at least 10 to 12% off the top because you're going to bargain on the car. So there's $3,500 gone. Because the car isn't exactly the car he wants. Maybe it's a coupe and not a convertible. Maybe it's an automatic, not a stick. Maybe it doesn't have the wheels he likes, whatever. Let's say he's going to deduct another $2,500 in his mind for that. And then he's also going to walk around the car with a fine-tooth comb, look at anything the car may need in the next 2 to 3 years that he doesn't want to pay for, because at $25,000, he's already at the very top of his budget. He's going to deduct another $3,000 for tires, ceramic coating, a tune-up, whatever. So now that brings him to $24,500 is what he feels he wants to offer on the car. Now, unless this is a distress sale, obviously the only thing that's really going to happen here is that Bob the buyer is going to really upset Jim the seller. He's going to be completely offended that anyone would stoop to offering that low amount of money for this amazing car. And you see this in different variations and in different, geometries all the time in the Corvette world. And it's specifically with C5, C6, and C7 Corvettes, it's really bad because those are the cars, A, that people drive regularly. And usually these cars are being bought by people who work for a living, who have a very limited budget and want something special for themselves, but really don't have the largesse to just go, I want it, I'll take it. I mean, God bless you if you're in that position, but most of us who work for a living aren't. So, how can we help bridge the gap? We're going to get into that in just a moment. Okay, so now where we left off a minute ago, both parties were upset and neither has attained their goal of either selling or buying a Corvette. How to bridge the gap? And this is the hardest part. For both the seller and the buyer, you really have to remove emotion from the proceedings. And man, you and I both know that buying a Corvette is an emotional thing. You're doing this because you deeply, deeply want this, or as the seller, you're selling the car to either get your next Corvette, which you're really excited about, or you're moving out of the Corvettes because you have a hard time getting in and out of them anymore, and it's hard to let go of the wonderful memories you have with that car, which is a completely human thing, and I totally get it. But it ruins the math for both people. So let's pretend for a moment that we can remove the emotion for both of these people and have them look at this in a intelligent, cerebral manner. Here's how to bridge the gap. Sellers, here's what you need to do. As a seller, again, your love for the car does not make the car worth any more money to anybody else. Customizations you may have done may make the car worth a little bit more, but usually, especially if it's something that is extremely personal, you did the 5-foot by 5-foot mural of the Virgin Mary on the hood, as much as you love that, that may not help the value of the car to the general public. It may in fact hurt it. So you have to understand that anything that you did to truly make the car your own may actually hurt its value on the open market, not improve it. You also need to internalize that whatever you spent on maintenance didn't improve the value of the car. By doing good, intelligent, responsible maintenance, what you're doing is you're keeping the car at the value it's supposed to be at, the nominal value. If you haven't done your maintenance, the car is worth considerably less. Doing maintenance to the car just brings it up to spec. It does not bring it above the value of the car. And of course, unless you are dealing in true collector cars, something that is, very, very, very special, and not just because they only made 450 in this color that year. If you're dealing with, and it almost never happens with cars under $100,000. This is normally where the rich guys play, and they buy a Porsche Carrera GT for $400,000, hold it for 4 years, and all of a sudden it's worth 1.2 million. Those cars are always going up in value. Cars for regular people tend to lose value no matter what you do. It's a depreciating asset. So you have to accept that whatever you paid for the car 10 years ago, it's probably not worth that anymore, unless it's a very specific circumstance. Now, buyers out there, listen. You got to judge each car on its own merits. You can't say, well, I was on the internet, and I saw one for $9,000, so your car's too expensive. The fact that you saw a car similar to the one that this gentleman is offering for $9,000 3 years ago has nothing to do with the reality. You can't let that be it's like a dog who sees a chipmunk run into a wood pile on his first day in his new home, and then for the rest of that dog's life, he's still going back to that wood pile trying to find that chipmunk. It doesn't work that way. You have to judge each car on its own merits. And just because you saw one once online for $9,000 doesn't mean that every other one that you're looking at is overpriced. Educate yourself. You need to understand what it's really going to truly cost to buy a quality car of whatever kind that you're looking for. Look at 100 of them. Do your research. Watch YouTube videos. Any of that stuff to educate yourself if you're not really, really tuned in with how the market is doing today. And with the economy the way it is, the market can change pretty quickly. So keep up with it. And buy the car. If you're going to buy the car, make your offer on what the car is today, not for what you're afraid of what might happen to that car in the future. Okay, so let's say you're buying a C5 Z06 and the car's got 30,000 miles on it. The price is fair. It's in excellent condition. It's a 1 or 2 owner, good maintenance records, but the torque tube hasn't failed yet. Or it might need a clutch. Or maybe the balancer is going to start wobbling in 6 months. It's not legitimate to knock those possibilities off of what you're willing to pay for the car. You need to pay for the car that is sitting in front of you right now. It is your responsibility as the buyer to make sure you have budgeted yourself correctly so that you have a reserve off to the side should any of those things occur once you own the car. So if your budget's $25,000, you should realistically be looking at $20,000 cars and keeping that $5,000 aside for things that may need to be done right away. Unforeseen, rainy day fund, whatever. But if you're on a $25,000 budget and what you really, really want is a 2010 C6 ZR1, you ain't gonna get it. It's not gonna happen. So it's not to say you can't have the car, but it's gonna require patience, strategic saving, and planning. And then in 1, 2, 10 years, you may very well be able to get that dream car of yours. But you have to be realistic as a buyer as to what you can afford and what you can afford to maintain. If we do those things, then both the buyer and the seller can come together and hopefully both walk away at least satisfied. In a good deal, no one's ever ecstatic. Everybody, it's compromise, right? Everybody should have to give up a little something that they didn't want to give up, but overall the deal works for everybody. So in summation, here's what it really comes down to. Buyers and sellers, number one, communicate with each other. Speak the truth. Be honest about what you want. Be honest about what you're looking for. Be honest what you're selling. That's going to solve 80% of the problems. And for whatever you're told, trust but verify. Okay? Due diligence is on both of your sides. If you're not sure the buyer actually has the money, he needs to be able to prove that. If the seller is saying that the car just had a torque tube done and a balancer done, they need to be able to verify that with maintenance records. Transparency, communication, and mostly education. Just like I've been saying through this entire video, make sure that you've educated yourself on what you are trying to buy, what the actual value is, and sellers, same thing. Educate yourself on what those cars are actually bringing without the rose-tinted glasses of because it's your car and it won 3 trophies, it's worth a lot more than that. Because in reality, it's not. There's a couple other videos on the internet you might want to look up about this. I can't remember who did them right now, but this gap in the Corvette market is very interesting. It's got all kinds of elements of fuzzy math, psychology, all kinds of neat stuff. So if you want to do more, check it out. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I look forward to talking to you again next week. Have a good weekend.